anymore. Today, I'm going to show you how to help your child focus and sustain their attention without medications by removing exponential barriers that impede your child's exponential success so that you don't have to worry about your child's future. I want you to look at the upper left picture. Imagine this child struggling with expressing her thoughts on paper, which is very common in children with ADHD, and transitioning into a child who loves telling about her stories and loves expressing herself. Or a child to the lower left, that's 10 minutes of homework turns into this 2 hours of a battle and all this procrastination. To transitioning to somebody who's successful and can get their work done independently. The homework's no longer in the bottom of their book bag, but it's actually turned in. Or to the upper right, where your child has actually enough time to socialize and have fun with their friends. Imagine the child at the lower left overcoming their obstacles and succeeding. Well, this is what we do, and this is what this is all about. We want to show you how to turn worry about your child into peace of mind, dispel the myths of ADHD, and help your child build confidence and resiliency so they can build their own muscle and actually get better. Now, many of you are probably, working remotely with your child, and man, it can be a battle. And overcoming these things and seeing difficulties and all this resistance and the learning problems, attention can be extremely difficult on many levels. Even with reading, you're reading through a passage and you have to reread that passage, and you don't even like to read because you can't even focus and pay attention. It's not fun. Or maybe, this constant battle of, procrastination and trying to get your stuff done. And literally, I hear this so many times, 10 minutes of homework. If the child would just focus for 10 minutes, they would get it done. So all this procrastination and all this fighting, which leads to underachievement in school and people just not knowing what to do or where to turn to and what help they need to get. Well, look, we've been doing this for a long time. We know exactly how to help with these situations, and we can help you get through this process. Now, not so long ago, a little over 10 years ago, I was working with a child. And I was trying to help this child that was just about ready to get kicked out of a local private school, very prestigious local private school. They were moving from first grade to second grade, and they wanted to see if I could help because the traditional methods just were not working. And so I literally had to get on the floor and work with this child to get through the assessment. And the sad thing was, at the end of the assessment, there wasn't a lot that we could do that wasn't already being done. So it was at that point I decided to figure this out. Is there something else out there? We have all this technology in the world, all these powerful computer programs and computers. Is there something that we can do? So I dropped everything. I traveled the country. I did research, read hundreds of articles, tons of books, met with experts, and I could not believe what I found. There were so many things that you could actually do to help people get better. But the biggest thing I found was nobody was putting that all together. Some people focus on certain areas of specialty. But where's the big coach? Where's the person that's advising on all the things to do? Yeah, tutoring helps, and learning specialty helps. Medication helps. Brain training helps. All these things help, but who's coordinating this? Who's putting it all together? Well, I thought, who better than a neuropsychologist? My job is not only discovering the difficulties, and perhaps even the diagnosis in children, but more importantly, what can be done about those things? And that's the most important message. What are some of the myths about things like ADHD? Well, my child doesn't have an attention problem because, I hear this all the time. My child doesn't have an attention problem because they can play video games for like 2 or 3 hours. But it's not really the kind of attention we're talking about, because then when they turn to do their homework or their work or their schoolwork, they're just struggling just to get a few minutes of work done or to stick to it. Maybe math isn't their thing, and they're making these careless errors, and you're wondering, well, why did you do so poorly on the test? It wasn't because you didn't know the information. Like, you knew the information last night. What happened? They weren't able to focus, or maybe they missed a problem because they missed a sign. Positive was a negative. They just, they ran out of time on the test or whatever it is. Many of these children are seen as being lazy, but guess what? They're not lazy. Can you imagine trying to focus and sustain your attention on a brain-based difficulty and your brain just isn't doing this? It's like a duck swimming on a pond and the feet are moving super fast and the duck's just kind of moving around while everybody else isn't doing that because they are able to just kind of focus and listen. Another myth, well, you have to medicate your child. And a lot of people, I'm telling you, especially in California, I've worked all over the country, but especially in California, people do not want to, unless they have to, use medication. And I'll tell you, medication has its place. There's many people that use medication with their children, many people who do not want to do that. It's not an either or. You can use medication. But I'm here to tell you, there is no smart pill. There's no pill that helps your child overcome executive function problems or expands their working memory. If there is, we should probably all go out and buy stock in that company. But today, there is nothing like that. Simple sustained attention. And it's not really a lifelong solution. The 30-year MTA study, multi-site study done throughout the country, showed the outcome. What is the difference between somebody taking medication from an early age versus somebody who doesn't? What is their outcome? Exactly the same. So we know that actually it doesn't make long-term differences. Where did all these myths come from? And why is it that we are trying to make excuses or, hey, this is a gift and there's so many wonderful things about it? And I'm telling you, just because your child has a brain-based difficulty doesn't mean they don't have gifts and talents. And if you do something about it, doesn't mean they're going to lose those things. Like, we don't have brain suckers. We don't have anything to take things away. We can help your child add things to their actual functioning. So here comes the amazing thing. Around the turn of the century, we had this amazing imaging that came to be. And so things like ADHD, what could we do? We could see like the dysregulation in the frontal lobe. Why in the frontal lobe? Well, when you're distracted and your subcortical brain is so, you saw this when they were little babies. Like, there's a cat, there's a dog, and they're all like into those things, the stimulus right in front of them. Today, it's the computer, or the little shiny thing over there. Like, I had to go do my research on the computer, and all of a sudden, they're like on Facebook or whatever book they're on these days. And like, they never did their research. They're checking their email. They're doing all these different things. Well, the frontal lobe actually helps inhibit. It actually helps with attention regulation. Regulation for things that maybe not be so intrinsically interesting, like their homework assignment or their paper that they have to write for like 2 or 3 hours. That's not something that's any fun anymore. So let me go down to this slide down here and show you ways that you can actually overcome these things. And one of the first ways to do is give us a call and schedule an appointment, because guess what? We are going to help you walk through the process. And the process starts by giving us a call, and we're going to set up an assessment, and we're going to set up some different things to help assess your child in very deep levels. Now, where do you do this today? You go to the pediatrician's office, and you get to spend, annually maybe a whole 20 minutes with them, 30 if you're lucky, and they're going to look at things like height, weight, shoe size, and all the things that, making sure your child is healthy. They might ask you a few questions about school, and off you go. Unless there's some major problem, they don't have the time because of managed care. You just don't have the time in the doctor's office. Where else do you look at these things? In school with standardized testing. That doesn't even come close to the nuance that you need. And even if you do, and you're fortunate enough to get the testing in the school, they don't have the resources to go into depth. So unless there's this big wide gap, and I wrote a chapter about this, it's not failure enough. Like, your child isn't doing poorly enough. They're still getting A's and B's. Like, sorry, there's nothing we can do about that. That's not where you want to be. You want to be at an early intervention or prevention model to overcome these things so we can circumvent the suffering and get better. So where does this start? We start with an assessment. And guess what? In COVID-19, we figured out how to do this in your home remotely. So you don't even have to come into our center. You don't even have to live by our center. You need to live in California. We can send equipment. We can log into your computer, and we can provide this assessment for your child. And we're gonna look at things like learning, attention, memory, their ability level, and compare that to their academic level. And the assumption is that the ability level and the skill level should line up. So if there's things like your child is in this, high average range, but they're reading at a low average range, that's a problem. And why is it a problem that's important to identify? Because they can overcome that. You don't want your child limited by what they can learn because they can read at a low average level when their intelligence is much higher than that. We can actually change that, and that's why it's so important to know. Knowledge is king. It helps us have opportunities. It doesn't give your child anything. Every child is different. Every child is unique. I've done thousands of evaluations with children, and every time, sometimes it's like, oh man, this reminds me of this one child, but they're different in this way. And how are we going to help this child? And they respond differently to interventions. If you've seen one child with ADHD, you've seen one child with ADHD, that's it. Like, even if you look up the symptoms, they can be very different. There's actually 3 types of ADHD, if you didn't know this. Predominantly inattentive type, predominantly hyperactive impulsive type, or you can have all 3. And all the symptoms come up with very different profiles. When you had your child and you were pregnant, you wouldn't have stopped in a heartbeat just doing a stethoscope and saying, oh yeah, my baby's okay. You did imaging. And why would you do that? You want to see if the heart is beating and the lungs are breathing and all the things. Well, why wouldn't we do that with the brain? Wouldn't we want to kind of look into the brain? So actually, with very non-invasive sensors, you just put sensors on the head, you can actually do this today. And what's amazing about that is you can see and assess, but more importantly, you can actually make things better through this knowledge. I'm going to tell you about that in just a minute. Think about the brain like a computer. So most people understand working memory, the ability to hold information in mind and mentally manipulate it. By the way, that's the most important thing, the biggest predictor of academic success, working memory. So think of like the RAM of the computer. If your RAM is limited, then you can only run certain programs on it. You can't even run the big complex programs. You have to upgrade the chip. Well, guess what? You can do that with the brain. You can actually increase the RAM of your child's brain, but fortunately, you don't have to buy a chip and put it in your child's brain. You can do specific exercises and help them get better. Also, think of the brain as a very interconnected organ full of networks. So the science has moved from a phrenology approach, like bumps to the head, right? Like certain areas of the brain, to a system of nodes and networks, hubs that are really important in communication and their connectivity. We're different from apes in the way we're connected. And the amazing thing about that is our adaptive brain can actually change the way we use our brain and make it more efficient. With amazing imaging that's available today, that I can actually do in your home, that we do in the clinic. We do the same level in the clinic as at your home. We can see the rate of firing of the neurons. Why would that be important? Well, because slow neuronal functioning in 80% of children, that's the ADHD. That's why stimulant medication works in many cases. Now, it's not a comprehensive solution. It's not a long-term solution, but it's very helpful. Maybe we have, like in this case right here, we have this neuron and this axon right here, and it's not firing properly. Well, maybe you could use all these other tracks instead. Maybe you could train to get that track better. Wouldn't that be amazing? Well, you can actually use modern technology today. Look, we're sending spaceships to Mars. We should be able to do this with the brain. And guess what? We've been able to do this since the 1960s in some capacity, but with modern computers, we can do this even better. So what are we looking at now? The speed of processing within the brain. We can see how fast the interconnections are going, and we can analyze all this data and show this to you. We can show the brain maps to you. We can show you objectively. So wouldn't it be interesting? And my engineers that come to see me love this, because when I start speaking fast forward transform, they're like, yeah, I know what that is. Show me mathematically how my child's brain is functioning, and then tell me how that we can use that information to make that better. We can actually do that. So how do you do that? You give us a call, and we simply send you a kit, and we're going to log into that computer. And so this is it right here. We just send you this kit, computer, there's a cap, and the equipment. It looks pretty simple, but we're standing on the shoulders of giants. This was done with a multi-million-dollar grant with the National Institute of Health. Dr. Robert Thatcher and others did this amazing study and has this amazing database, so we can compare your child's brain against a normative database for their exact same age, and we can see what does it look like compared to other people who don't have an attention regulation problem. We can actually see that. And we can use this information to actually show your child how they're using their brain. It's like a mirror to the brain. It's like a brain-computer interface. So what would your job be if we send this to your house? All you do is put this cap on their head. That's it. Your job is over. And one of our technicians would log in. Our very highly trained brain trainers will log into the computer, and they're going to take over from there. And what do? Now, this is just an illustration. There's none of these wires and none of this kind of floating around. But I just think it's important to understand that this information, just through these sensors, and by the way, there's no electricity, nothing being delivered to your child's brain. We have these sensors, it goes through an amplifier, and we can actually image what the brain activity looks like. So if you do an MRI, you're only taking a picture of the brain, and you're not even looking at the traffic flow. That's the important thing. What is the flow of traffic in your child's brain? Is it traffic jam? Is it like a pathway to grandma's house when it should be a superhighway, 5-lane superhighway, and everybody's kind of cruising down the road? Well, we can actually see that with the imaging. And let me move down here to a brain with ADHD. So here's a brain with ADHD. There's frontal lobe dysfunction, and we can actually see this in the brain. And why would that be important? Because with that knowledge, we can actually help the child train to get better. And through the brain-computer interface. I'm going to show you how we do that in a moment. So how do we do that? Let me see here. So here it is. Here is brain training where the child puts the cap back on and has this computer. Now the computer is amazing because we have artificial intelligence, we have our own software in it, and it's going to walk you through, and we're not going to leave you alone. Our expert brain trainers are going to be logged in, walking your child through the brain training. And here is this amazing system. These are the brain waves right here in real time, sampling your child's brain at 128 times a second. And these areas right here, well, I guess I should point back here, right? So these areas back here, this little line right here is the threshold. So we're saying, hey, if you can get your brain activity compared to the normative database, if you can get it below this threshold, that's defined as being better, we're going to give you a reward. And that reward is this car moving. So you can see the car is moving. So in other words, every time the brain gets better, it's functioning, so it's focused and paying attention better. The car moves. That little needle moves. And the upper part up here is the reward schedule. So we're making your child successful 50% of the time, no matter what. That's what our technicians are doing. They're making sure your child is successful and they're happy and they're having a good time. Now look, people use brain-computer interface to use robotic prosthetic arms. With their brain, they're learning how to use robotic prosthetic arms. So I'm here to tell you, if they can do that, your child can overcome their attention problem. We've done this with hundreds and hundreds of children, and actually even adults, because sometimes parents are like, hey, that's me too. And so they do it too. But look, the brain is an adaptive organ. If you can learn how to play piano, play tennis, you can learn how to use your anterior cingulate cortex to focus and pay attention better. You can learn how to get that connectivity. How does that work? Here's how it works. Here is a neuron that has no myelin sheathing on it. Why would that be important? Myelin sheathing makes the neurotransmission go faster. So if you exercise your brain over and over, you surround it with fatty tissue. Out here you have oligodendrocytes that will say, hey, you're using this pathway a lot. So if you use the pathway a lot, over and over, your brain says, hey, that might be important. Why don't we put some myelin sheathing there? And you can actually increase neurotransmission by up to 1,000 times faster. That's crazy, but that's neuroplasticity. Look, we're the most adaptive species, arguably, like, you know, depending how your take on is in 2020. Whew, you know, we're still working on things, right? But yeah. So here is receptor sites, and here's another way that neuroplasticity works, and that is, see these little purple buttons right here? These are receptor sites where the neurotransmitters have to go into, and if you don't have enough of those, then you can't use the neurotransmitter. But if you do, then you can use it better. And guess what? You can make more of those through the process of neuroplasticity. So I want to show you this amazing image. Like, this is from our clinic. This is a person right here that had ADHD and the underactivity of the brain. And through the training, this child actually overcame his ADHD and was better than he would have been on medication alone. How do we know this? Because we test children and we can see exactly how much better they're doing. So then what do? Well, you know, here's the difference. So when we work with children, we go to the deepest level. We're going to the level of the neuron, and we're going to the level of the axon and the receptor sites. We're helping your child build the architecture of their brain so they can actually focus and pay attention better. But there's actually more that you can do. So we do a check-in, and we see how your child is doing. We see how the progress is going. We monitor things. But the next thing you can do is actually practice skills. So just like you would like a violin or, you know, some kind of musical instrument or doing track, you can actually train the brain through skills training. Now, what do we know about skills training? Skills training is one of those things where you have to do it often, you have to do it at a hard enough level, and you have to do it long enough. So it's a little more arduous. You got to put the effort into it, but it's possible. So if you get the first stage right and you build the brain, now you can tolerate the second stage. Some people can do it simultaneously, some people do it sequentially. How do we know what to do? Well, we have a lot of experience, and we're going to advise you, and we're going to be your guide through this. So how do we do this? We send you equipment. We're going to clear the room through distractions, and we're going to do some amazing exercises through the computer again. We're going to guide you, we're going to guide your child and do fun exercises. Who does these exercises? Well, guess what? How is Stephen Curry so amazing? Stephen Curry is the epitome of brain training. He's not the tallest guy in the court. He's not the fastest guy in the court. He's not the strongest guy in the court. And he even can't even jump the highest. But look at his amazing skills. He's doing a lot of brain training. Many of the things that he does, we actually do. We've trained Stanford athletes in the course that I teach up at Stanford on the psychology of sport. And when we look at these athletes that are elite athletes, Division I athletes, and we look at their opportunities for brain training, huge opportunities. Why would that be? Because they've never done it before. They don't even know that these things exist. They don't know what those opportunities are, and they get so excited when they find out what they can actually do. We actually do really fun things too, like virtual reality training, where your child, through virtual reality, puts the goggles on, and not only are we doing vision training, so how do you focus on your visual field and the chalkboard and switch your attention from your desk to the chalkboard and back and forth, but you can do working memory exercises within that space, and it's a ton of fun. And so let's see, what else do we have for you? So here's the deal. We want your child to be successful. And where do we take them? You know, we want your child to not only be successful in the immediate future, but in their long-term future. We want to help your child develop over time. That's why we do annual brain checks. That's why we don't participate in that wait to fail approach. We help you be the guide for your child so you can provide early interventions so they can actually realize their potential and get exponentially better. And when they do that, they can sing and they can dance like nobody's watching. And that's what it's all about. And, you know, we want to provide that happiness for you and your child so you can stop worrying, they can focus. And I'll tell you, I have heard this so many times, remote school has brought so many things to the forefront for so many parents. We want your child and you to be happy. We want your child and your entire family to be celebrating together and not being worried about missing homework and, maybe not taking the promotion at work or like taking time off work so we can actually get through this process. That's not a fun space to be. Here's a child who overcame dyslexia that actually had ADHD too. And so when these things happen, this is the look of awe, because this is the space that we live in today. 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't much that we could do. And in fact, 20 years ago, there wasn't anything that I advised to do because I didn't know about them. These things were just coming to be. Even though they had been around for a while, people just did not know about them. But this is the look of awe that we should all have when our child overcomes things like attention. And, Aunt Sally and Uncle Joe should be like blown away. Like, these are the things that like people should be like, this is impossible. Like, he just cleaned up after himself. Like, hey, where are all the toys? And even the cat's going to be going like, what the heck is going on? I love that picture of the cat. It's pretty funny. So if you're interested, give us a call. Look, like, we've done this over and over with so many people. I know what we can do with children. And how would you know anyway? When you do an assessment, it doesn't give anything to your child. What it does is it gives you information. It gives you information about their ability levels, where they should be, and what's possible for them to realize their exponential potential, for them to actually realize their achievement and ability level. And this just doesn't happen in the classroom. This happens on the sports field. This happens in everyday interactions socially. If you're not focused and paying attention, if you're not able to arrive on time and make your appointments with your friends, those things build up. And not only now in the immediate future, but later in college, people, maybe they have to pick a different major because they can't keep up with the work. And maybe, potential spouses don't end up as potential spouses anymore. Or unfortunately, we see a lot of things happen when children grow up into adults and they miss that promotion or they have failed relationships. All these things, like with modern technology, can actually start to change right now by doing this training. And the training, like, one of the questions people have is like, does this last? Well, of course it does. If you make true changes in your brain, they're long-lasting changes. And your child is using their brain intensively in the classroom, socially, emotionally. You can actually train the emotions as well. We're focused on attention right now, and you can train that and overcome that, and it lasts a lifetime. Now, in terms of developmental stagnation, maybe what that means is your child might not have kept pace with their peers. Could that happen again? Yeah. Might you have to update the training again? You might. But look, that's a huge opportunity, because 20 years ago, you couldn't even do that stuff. Today, you can. If you are one of those people out there that would like to discuss this further, give us a call. We can walk you through the process. And if it's a good match, we think that we can help you, and you feel like, your belief system, you are ready to take that next step. You are ready to be the guide for your child to help them get better. We can actually help you through that process. How long does it take? 3 to 4 months to start seeing a substantial difference. What's the information we need to see? We need to see where they're starting. We need to see their learning curve, and we can advise you along the way. Everybody's different. Some people have a little opportunity. Some people have bigger opportunities. Some people learn quicker than others. But the point is, the earlier the better. It's never too late. I've trained somebody in their 90s before, and they actually got better. But your child can get better today. Give us a call if you're interested. We'd love to talk with you. Of course, there's a ton of different solutions that you can look into. If you're interested in anything that I talked about today, I will have a link below so you can check out our website and a form below if you have any questions, so you can get started today if you're interested. Have a great day, everybody.